Now that you know what complex ratios or complex fractions are, I want to show you some examples of how we use them with unit rates. Example 1, it takes Mrs. LaFave 1/4 of an hour to run 1.5 miles. What's her unit rate in miles per hour? So I'm going to start by drawing a table. I'm going to label it miles and hours. Because they want a unit rate, I know one of these values, either miles or hours, is going to be 1. Because they worded it miles per hour, that's telling me that the hour is the unit that's getting 1. I'm going to put in what I know from the problem. It's 1.5 miles. Really important to read carefully so you don't put things in the wrong place. And 1/4 of an hour. Now I need to figure out if I'm scaling up, scaling down. I just know that I'm trying to get to 1 hour. I'm going to show you a couple ways to look at this. One thing I know is that 1/4, if I double it, if you're the type of person that likes to multiply by 2, that's going to give me 1/2. To maintain equivalency or equality, I want to also multiply the other side by 2. 1.5 times 2 would give me 3. So that tells me I can do 3 miles and a half an hour. So now let's continue this. I'm still not at the unit rate of 1, but I can scale up 1/2 to 1 simply by multiplying it by 2 or doubling again. 1/2 times 2 is 1. Let's maintain equivalency and multiply the other side by 2. And that gives me 6. Now I have a unit rate in miles per hour. 6 miles in 1 hour. Another way that you could think about doing this with the ratio table would actually require fewer steps. If I think about 1.5 miles and I look at 1/4 of an hour to get that done, if I want to get to 1 hour, another option is to multiply 1/4 times 4. And some of you know that to get a fraction, if I want to multiply it by something to get 1, I multiply it by its reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 over 1. 1/4 times 4 over 1 would equal 4/4 or 1 whole. So now I could do the same thing over here, multiply it by 4, and I'm going to get 6 as well. So either of those methods work great, but there's my unit rate. 6 miles in 1 hour. As we do these last 3 problems, I will read the problem and then I want you to pause the video and just try to solve it yourself. And then hit play again and you can check your work. This is a good time for you to practice on your scratch paper and just ensure that you're on the right track. Problem number 2. It says to find the unit rate for each scenario. 2/3 of a gallon per half hour. Find gallons per hour. Because it's written as gallons per hour, I know they want to know in 1 hour how many gallons I have. Let's put in the information that we got from the problem. 2/3 gallon, 1/2 hour. And I'm going to go ahead and put my 1 here for the unit rate. For this problem, I know how many halves it takes to make a whole. That would be 2. So I'm going to multiply it by 2. Notice that that's also multiplying it by its reciprocal, 2 over 1. And that gives me 1 whole. Now, 2/3 times 2. Think about that as 2 over 1. When you multiply fractions, you'll multiply the numerators. 2 times 2, which is 4, times the denominators. 1 times 3, which is 3. That is an improper fraction. If you need help remembering how to convert this to a mixed number, reach out to me or the math specialist and we'll work with you on that. Example 3, 3/4 cup juice per 2/3 cup sugar. Find cups juice per cup sugar. So pause it and try to work on it, and then hit play when you're ready to go over your work. Again, I'm using a ratio table. I'm going to put J for juice and S for sugar. It is cups juice per cup sugar, so that's my 1. I'm going to start with a few. I'm not sure how many I'll need yet. 3/4 cup juice to 2/3 a cup of sugar. Actually, I'm going to use something I've talked about in the last few problems here, and that is multiplying by the reciprocal to get to 1 whole. Notice when it was 1/4, I multiplied by 4/1. I got 1 whole. 1/2, I could multiply by 2/1. It's reciprocal, and I get 1 whole. So the reciprocal of 2/3 would be 3/2, 3/2. If I multiply 2/3 times 3/2, and let me write that 2/3 over here so you can see it a little more clearly. If I go across, 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. And we know that 6/6 simplifies to 1. So that's going to help me scale up to 1. So now I'm going to multiply 3/4 by 3/2. So to do this, I'm going to set up my 3/2 here, multiply that by that 3/4. Numerator times numerator is 9. Denominator times denominator is 8. And so I see that for every 1 cup of sugar, I would have 9/8 cups of juice. Again, improper. If you need help with that, reach out to us and we'll help. This last one is an opportunity to compare different unit rates. You will have a problem like this in your practice. If you want to try it, pause the video and then hit play when it's time to review your work. I'm going to divide the space in half since I do have 2 different storage containers. Liquid enters the first container at a rate of 2/3 gallon per 1/4 minute. So let's start in the first one and draw our ratio table. We have gallons per minute. We know that it's 2/3 of a gallon, 1/4 of a minute, and that's for container 1. Container 2, the second storage container, fills at a rate of 3/5 gallons per minute. Notice too, if I want to compare these, it's really important that you're using the same units of measurement and you're putting them in the same order. That way you know that your unit rates are in the same unit of measurement. 3/5 gallon, 1/6 of a minute. Now, another good tool here, again, is using that rule of multiplying by the reciprocal to get 1. So here I would need to multiply by 4. So we're going to multiply 2/3 by 4. To write 4 as a fraction, I put it over 1. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3. So it's 8/3 gallons in 1 minute here. Now, for container 2, the reciprocal of 1/6 would be 6/1. It takes 6/6 to make 1 whole. So I'm going to multiply this by 6/1. 6 times 3 is 18. 1 times 5 is 5. Now, it's going to be really hard to compare these two without having them have common denominators or putting them into their decimal form. We've talked about common denominators in the last few days. Let's look at maybe decimal form here. I'm going to start with this one, 18 divided by 5. So I know that 5 goes into 18 3 times, right? Because 5 times 3 is 15. So then I would subtract from the 18, 15, that 5 times 3, and I'm left with 3. That means the numerator would be 3. So now I'm at 3 3/5. Actually, before I go to decimal, let me not make my life harder than it needs to be. Let's just see what's going on here, right? 8 divided by 3. How many times does 3 go into 8? It only goes in 2 complete times. 3 times 2 is 6. Let's subtract 6 from 8. That leaves us with 2. So that actually isn't as hard to compare now that I've made them mixed numbers. So which one's being filled faster? In other words, which one has more gallons in 1 minute? That's going to be container 2. The rest of your work today is working with problems very similar to these. Make sure that you're reaching out for help and asking myself or the math specialist, and we'll get to you as soon as we can.